Okay, so you want to own a Pokemon card collection. The pitch writes itself. You buy a few cards, they go up in value, someone pays you twice what you paid, and you do it again. The internet is full of screenshots of people who bought a booster box for $150 that is now worth $900. People who paid $20 for a card that is currently graded PSA 10 and listed at $4,000. People who found the 1998 base set booster pack in a garage sale and sold it for more than a used car. That version of the story is real. It has happened. It continues to happen. Here is what that version of the story leaves out. The collector who hit on that garage sale booster pack had walked past 10,000 garage sales with nothing in them. The person holding the PSA 10 that lists at $4,000 paid $30 in grading fees, waited 8 months for the car to come back, and now it's competing with 68 other copies of the same PSA 10 on the same marketplace. And the booster box that went from $150 to $900 was an exception in a market full of booster boxes that went from $150 to $80. By the end of this, you will understand what a serious Pokemon card collection actually costs to build and maintain, where the money in this market comes from and where it disappears to, what the collectors and dealers who actually profit are doing differently from the ones who sell at a loss after 3 years and tell themselves they had fun, and why the card in the sleeve is almost never the most important variable in whether you make or lose money. Before anything else, you need to understand that a Pokemon card collection is not one thing. It's a category that contains at least 4 or 5 completely different financial positions, each with different cost structures, different risks, and different ways of failing. The first is the vintage raw collector, someone buying ungraded cards from the original 1999 base set and early expansions because they believe in the long-term appreciation of first-generation Pokemon material. The second is the grading speculator, someone buying cards in bulk, submitting them to PSA or Beckett for grading, and targeting the premium that a high numerical grade commands over an ungraded copy of the same card. The third is the sealed product investor, someone buying booster boxes, elite trainer boxes, and special collection sets at retail and holding them for appreciation as a sealed, unopened product. The fourth is the modern set collector, someone buying current releases to complete sets or chase specific cards in the current meta. These 4 positions have almost nothing in common financially. Understanding which one you're actually building determines everything about whether the math eventually works. The cost that most new collectors start with is the cost of the cards, and it is also one of the least predictive numbers in the whole equation. A base set Charizard in raw, ungraded, lightly played condition currently trades in the range of $600 to $1,200, depending on centering, surface condition, and corner wear. A PSA 10 copy of that same card, the professionally graded version with a perfect score, has sold at auction for prices ranging from $40,000 to just under $420,000, depending on the printing variant. The first edition version of the Shadowless Charizard in PSA 10 sold for $369,000 at PWCC auctions in 2022. The unlimited print run version in PSA 10 trades in the range of $5,000 to $15,000 currently. The gap between the raw card and the PSA 10 version of the same card is the central economic fact of modern Pokemon card collecting. And that gap is exactly what most new collectors think they can exploit, and almost none of them do, for reasons that become clear when you understand how grading actually works. The PSA 10 premium is real, but the path from buying a raw card to holding a PSA 10 is not the straight line that speculation videos make it look like. You buy a card, you assess it visually, you decide it looks clean enough to grade well, you pay the grading fee, you wait months for it to come back, and then you find out whether you were right. In most cases, you were not right. The majority of cards submitted to PSA do not receive a PSA 10. The most common result is a PSA 9. PSA grading fees as of 2024 start at roughly $25 per card for the standard service tier, which currently has a turnaround time measured in months. Express service at $65 per card reduces the wait. Super Express at $300 per card is the tier used when timing is critical and the expected value of the card justifies it. Walk through those numbers on a realistic submission. Say you believe you have a card in near mint condition that might receive a PSA 10. The raw card costs you $40. You submit it at the standard $25 tier. 8 months later, it comes back a PSA 9. A PSA 9 copy of that card trades at $60 on eBay. You paid $40 for the card, $25 for the grade, and you have $60 of realized value if you sell immediately. Subtract the eBay final value fee of 12.35% and the shipping cost, and you have roughly $51 of net proceeds against $65 of total investment. That is not an unusual outcome. That is the modal outcome for most card grading submissions by collectors who are not deeply experienced in assessing raw card condition before submission. The collectors who make grading economics work have typically spent years developing the ability to identify, before the card goes into the submission bag, whether the centering is within the tolerance PSA requires for a 10, whether the surface has print lines that PSA will dock for, whether the corners have micro wear that is visible under a loupe even when it looks clean to the naked eye. That skill takes years to develop and costs money in failed submissions while you are developing it. The sealed product market has its own economics that look more favorable on paper and are harder to execute than they appear. The thesis is straightforward. A booster box that retails at $150 at release will, if the set becomes desirable over time, appreciate to $300, $500, or more dollars as the print run is exhausted and demand from collectors who want sealed product continues. There are real examples of this working. The Hidden Fates Elite Trainer Box, which sold at retail for approximately $49 in 2019 and 2020, was trading at $300 to $400 by 2021. The Shining Legends booster boxes that retailed at around $150 in 2017 now trade at $600 and above for sealed product. The Sun and Moon base set booster boxes from 2017 sell for over $400 sealed. Here is what those examples do not show you. For every Hidden Fates that went up 6 times from retail, there's a product like the 2021 and 2022 releases where the Pokémon company dramatically increased its print runs to meet pandemic-era demand, and where a sealed booster box that retailed at $150 in 2021 trades at $80 to $110 today, in a market flooded with product that never got scarce. The print run is the variable that the sealed product investor cannot control and cannot predict. The Pokémon company makes its own decisions about how many units to produce based on demand signals that they understand better than any investor in the secondary market. When those decisions result in abundant supply, the scarcity premium that drives sealed product appreciation never materializes. And it has resulted in abundant supply repeatedly, including a period between 2020 and 2022 where demand spiked and production responded with such volume that the secondary market spent the following 2 years digesting the inventory. Let us put a real number on what it costs to build a collection that is worth taking seriously as a financial position, not a binder of cards you pulled from packs as a hobby, an actual collection with meaningful vintage holdings and graded key cards. A PSA 9 Charizard from the first edition base set currently trades around $12,000 to $20,000. The same card in PSA 8 is in the $4,000 to $8,000 range. An ungraded near-mint copy of the same card can be purchased from reputable dealers or auction houses in the range of $3,000 to $7,000 depending on condition. If you want to build a collection that includes the 10 most economically significant Pokémon cards, meaning the cards with the highest established auction histories and strongest secondary market demand, you are looking at a minimum floor of $100,000 assembled from PSA 8 and PSA 9 copies. PSA 10 versions of those same 10 cards would cost well over $1 million. That is before a single dollar of storage costs, insurance, display costs, or transaction fees. Storage for a serious collection requires acid-free card savers, penny sleeves, top loaders, binder pages rated for long-term archival use, and ideally humidity and temperature-controlled conditions for the highest value pieces. For a collection worth more than $50,000, most serious collectors obtain a homeowner's rider or a dedicated collectibles insurance policy. Collectibles insurance for a $100,000 collection costs roughly 1 to 2% of the insured value annually, which is $1,000 to $2,000 per year in premium. That cost applies whether the collection goes up in value or down. It applies whether you sold anything that year or not. It is the carrying cost of ownership, and it compounds over time in a way that many new collectors do not budget for. The revenue model of a Pokémon collection is built around one of three mechanisms: buying and holding for long-term appreciation, buying raw cards and grading them to capture the PSA premium, or dealing, meaning buying below market and selling at market or above through auction houses, at card shows, or through platforms like eBay and PWCC. Long-term appreciation is the model that requires the least active management and the most patience. The vintage first edition base set market has, over any 10-year window you choose to examine, produced positive returns for holders of high-grade copies. The PSA 10 Charizard first edition that sold for $369,000 in 2022 was worth approximately $50,000 in 2016. That is a 6 times return over 6 years. The same card is currently worth somewhere between $250,000 and $300,000 following the post-pandemic market correction that took most Pokémon card prices down 40 to 70% from their 2021 and 2022 peaks. The correction is the part of the appreciation story that the media videos filmed in 2021 tend not to show you, because most of those videos were filmed at the peak. The Pokémon card market experienced the same dynamic that other collectible markets have experienced repeatedly: a period of genuine scarcity and genuine demand appreciation, followed by a media-driven attention spike that brought in a wave of new buyers who paid peak prices, followed by a return toward fundamental values as the attention faded and the new buyers discovered that liquidity in a collectible market is not the same as liquidity in a stock market. A PSA 10 Charizard listed at $150,000 on eBay is not worth $150,000 until someone actually pays $150,000. The bid-ask spread on high-value Pokémon cards is wider than most new collectors expect, and selling a card at a top-of-market price requires finding one buyer at exactly the right moment, not 10 buyers who average out to a fair price. The dealing model has the most active management requirements and, in the hands of people who actually understand the market, the strongest margins. A dealer who buys a collection from a seller who needs to liquidate quickly at 50 to 60 cents on the dollar of market value and then sells the individual pieces through the right channels at or above market rates can build a sustainable margin. The challenge is that the dealer model requires deep knowledge of exactly what every card is worth, what condition it is actually in, what the liquidity is for that specific card in that specific grade, and what the fees are on every platform used to sell it. eBay charges 12.35% on the final sale value of trading cards. PWCC Auctions, which handles many of the highest value Pokémon transactions, charges a commission that varies by auction type. Card shows require table fees plus travel. Each channel has its own cost structure, and the dealer who does not account for all of them precisely tends to find that margins are considerably tighter than they appeared at the point of purchase. The dealer who succeeds over time in this market is not simply someone who knows a lot about Pokémon. They know what a PSA 9.5 misprint card from the first edition base set is worth in today's market. They know whether a specific shadowless card that graded PSA 9 is worth more or less than a first edition card of the same character in the same grade. They know which sets are currently being accumulated by the collectors who will drive the next round of price appreciation, and which sets are currently oversupplied. That knowledge is specific, it takes years to build, and the people who have it protect it. The investors who have made the most visible money in the Pokémon card market in the last decade are mostly not people who started by understanding Pokémon cards. They are people who understood either the collectibles asset class broadly or the sports card market specifically and applied that structural knowledge to Pokémon. Logan Paul paid $5.275 million for a PSA 10 Pikachu Illustrator card in 2021. setting the record for the highest price paid for a single Pokémon card. That purchase was as much a media event as a financial transaction. Gary Vaynerchuk, whose media presence in the sports card and collectibles market helped drive broader attention to vintage cards during the pandemic, built a position that reflected a sophisticated understanding of how collectibles markets work, not a belief that any specific card would go up by a specific amount. These are people who had existing capital, existing platforms, and existing relationships with high-volume dealers before they made large Pokémon purchases. The college student who hears about Logan Paul's Pikachu and buys a raw vintage card at peak prices is in a different financial position than Logan Paul was.